The return to office movement is BS. Not because going back to the office is a bad thing. It can be wonderful. But because leaders have gaslit their teams, saying it's all about creating community and connection. Sorry, but putting people side by side answering emails all day is not community. That's just one of the many brilliant bits of insight from today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast, Angela Stopper. Angela is the Chief Learning Officer at UC Berkeley. Yes, that UC Berkeley, the top public university in the nation. We talk about the need to actively cultivate community in the workplace and how that can happen in office or remotely. We explore how our career paths are no longer straight lines, but more like a treasure map with twists and turns and multiple X's marking the spots where we can find joy and meaning along the way. And we discuss how organizations can position themselves to be a helpful stop on that journey. Being more flexible is a great first step. Creating a culture where every person is seen, valued, and encouraged to speak from their unique experience, that's where things get really juicy. We cover so much good stuff during this conversation, thanks to Angela's brilliance. So let's dive in. Okay, Angela Stopper, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
TJ, I'm so excited to be with you today. I can't wait to start talking about how we can make work suck less for all of our friends out there.
I am excited as well. I think we'll have some good ideas, and I think your background is going to provide some interesting perspective, maybe newish perspective for a lot of folks who maybe have listened before because you come from the university world. And my hunch/hope is that there'll be some stuff that we can kind of talk about where, that world might be able to inform some of what we do on the sort of corporate side, and then maybe there's some interesting crossover the other way. So before we dive too deep, I'd love to give people a chance to kind of get to know you a little bit. So can you tell us a little more about what you are doing for work currently and how you came to be doing it?
Sure, I would love to. So I'm the Chief Learning Officer at UC Berkeley. In that role, I manage the team that does the people development and the organization development for our campus, so our staff and our faculty. Basically, we do everything from management training, career, professional development, organization consulting, strategic planning, succession planning, but working with the staff and the faculty here on campus. So it's a very similar role to a chief learning officer at any organization. Berkeley it's a higher ed institution, one of the best in the world, not just in my opinion, but one of the greatest places in the world to learn and to work and to share and to make change within the world, California, the world as a whole. And we have employees that work for us just like any other organization. And we're in that war for talent, if that's still a phrase that people are using, with some really, really fascinating companies here in the Bay Area. So as an employer, we need to make sure that we're taking care of our staff, taking care of our faculty, making sure we're taking care of them as whole people so they keep engaged, keep their job, show up for work, do a good job, and that's kind of the role of the team that I manage and myself. And so prior to this role, I worked for many, many years in executive education. So that's kind of where I started my career, really working within business schools, creating learning and development programming for some of the top organizations in the world. I worked with the Department of Defense, ExxonMobil, Aramark, just for, a couple examples, and really did this work, but for other organizations. And so after doing that for 20 so years and finishing a master's degree and a PhD in workforce education and organization development, I thought, boy, it'd be nice to turn all this experience inward and start doing this kind of work for a company that I actually work for, not just selling it to other organizations. And saw the opportunity at UC Berkeley, and I thought, what an interesting job. So being the chief learning officer at one of the top public research universities in the world, that sounds like fun. So they liked my credentials. I liked the job, and here I am.
I love that, and I love your perspective. It's interesting, right? Because I wasn't necessarily thinking about the fact that you talk about the war for talent, and that sort of makes sense to me. Like, there's lots of people who could be a great fit across universities, corporate jobs, nonprofits, whatever. But then I wasn't really thinking directly about the geography of where you are and how like rich with competition that is. So that adds like this added layer of interestingness to what you're doing there, that you're in the midst of the center of the tech universe and all that good stuff. Does that make your job harder or easier?
I think it depends how the economy is going, to be honest with you. It's an interesting question because people generally don't come to work in higher education to make huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
And, there's kind of it's not so much a truth as it is a maybe understanding that if you go and work in tech, you're going to make $1 bazillion. And, tech is not all, unicorns and
of course.
But there are a lot of perks that you can have by working for Facebook, a LinkedIn, a Google, a Microsoft, and all those folks are right here in our backyard. And so as we're thinking about the talent that we bring into the university, which are a lot of really similar jobs to what you can work in any corporate world, you need to think about what is the value proposition that we're bringing to our employees. We are, when the economy is not as great, we're really stable. I'm not saying we don't do layoffs. We do layoffs. We have budget goals just like everybody, but we're probably a little more stable than certainly some of the startups and the, VC kind of things. And we're a bit more stable. We're also 150 plus year old institution, which any organization that's been around for that long has a little bit more stability.
Yeah.
Some people call it bureaucracy. Some people call it stability. It just depends what lens you want to look at.
It depends on the economy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I'll say, when tech has their big booms, people might prefer being in that space versus an institution like ours. When tech has its big layoffs, which happens cyclically, just like anything else, we get a whole bunch of resumes from folks that have been working at the Googles and the Microsofts and the tech that are looking for something maybe a little bit more stable. So I think it's pluses and minuses on both sides. That one of the big areas we look to for our employee value proposition is the work that we do here. It literally changes people's lives.
Yeah.
So as a public research institution, our goal is to democratize education. And to bring that economic engine to individuals in California, in the United States, across the world, to really help people change their lives. I'm a product of the public research institution space. So I have my PhD from Penn State, which is also a public research institution. I never in my life would have been able to afford that kind of a career investment.
Yeah.
Had it not been for the public research institutions. And so it changed my life. People that come from where I come from don't, have the kind of degrees and credentials, get to talk to fabulous people like you on a podcast and the rest of the world about how we can make the world a better place,
Yeah.
So that passion and that drive and that really wanting to do something meaningful is incredibly relevant here. And not to say it's not incredibly relevant at our, our competition for talent, because it is. But we have a little bit of an upshot in that space, I think, personally. Totally biased opinion.
I can understand that perspective, right? Because, for lack of a better term, it's a little more pure. Certainly lots of tech companies speak about wanting to change the world, and some legitimately do in a good way. Like, I don't want to dismiss that, but when you are sort of grounded in a university environment and it's all about, like you said, the goal of democratizing education and the deep research that honestly so many of the big companies in the world benefit from. The large public institutions research ultimately finds its way out into the world and makes a big difference there. So it makes me think about a lot of people, certainly in the last handful of years, COVID plus everything, have really thought more about meaning and purpose and all that kind of stuff at work. And not to say that everybody needs to go running away from the corporate sector, but I just wonder, for some people, maybe they haven't even entertained the idea. I think when you're where you are, it might be more thought of because UC Berkeley is such a big institution, so well known, so well respected. If you live in a space where that's not prominent in your area, it just might not be part of your worldview. So I think it's an interesting thing for people to like consider at least, and go, maybe I could spend some time there, and maybe that would help me connect to a sense of purpose and meaning that I'm not finding. So I love that idea from a public research institution perspective. And it makes me wonder a little bit, kind of stepping back, your own perspective on work. Something I like to ask people is, what role does work play in your life? Where does it sit in the big picture for you in terms of what matters to you in life?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So I'm a true Gen Xer. I'm a work hard, play hard kind of gal.
Yeah.
But work is really, I'm in a space now where I love my job. I love my team, my peers. I love the team that I manage. I love my boss. I love our top layer of leadership. People are really passionate and driven and smart, not just brain smart, but EQ smart. Like it's such an amazing, engaging, challenging, interesting place to work. And I will say this is probably the first time in my career where I have loved what I do. I'm not saying that there's not bad days and good days. Of course there are.
Of course.
But I've gotten to a place now where you watch these sitcoms on television. I'll never forget years and years ago, back in the 90s, I was watching Friends, and there was an episode where Chandler is saying something about not liking his work, and everybody else in the room is like, what do you mean? I can't wait to get back to work. I love my job. My job's amazing. And I remember watching that as a, I don't know, teenager or whatever I was. And I thought, well, that's a weird thing. Like, clearly nobody loves their job. Like, that's just, nobody loves what they do, right? Because, you work to get a paycheck, and I used to joke that, I worked, so Angela worked, so Ange could afford shoes and beer or whatever. So, but asking that same question now, where I'm in this space where I have a peer team who is really supportive and engaged, and who are experts in their own space and are allowed to kind of own their work and move it forward, because our manager is so supportive and understanding of what we're doing and encouraging us to own our work and move it forward, and having this wonderful team that I lead of experts who love what they do and are engaged with what they do. It's such a pleasure to come to work. So in this space, it's not just Angela working so Ange can afford to buy fun shoes and go on vacation. I'm truly in a space now where my job adds to my happiness, my fulfillment, my engagement with life, which is, a place that it took me a long time to get to. And so I don't want to minimize that. I don't think that that's something that everybody has. And, I really encourage people to think about with a big growth mindset, how can you get to that space? Because even if it doesn't seem realistic, as I was watching that TV show all those years ago, it can happen. It really can. And so, thinking about how you can get to that space where your work life supports and enhances your play life. Yeah. That whole work-life balance thing that we're talking about, I think is a really cool place. So that's where I'm at right now.
I love that. And I think it's great to kind of share that you kind of weren't in that space and you found your way to that space, because I think it does show that, because I think some people just think, well, some people are just love their job people. Do you know what I mean? And that's almost like when I heard that Friends thing, my first thought of was like Ross, paleontologist. He was totally geeked out on his work. And it was just oh, that's just some people are that way. And that's not available necessarily to the rest of us, as but I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think, what I always say is it's kind of half of our waking hours is.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So at the very least, it shouldn't suck, but if it can allow you to feel some sense of joy, fulfillment, to feel a sense that you're sort of bringing yourself into the work and finding reward and recognition and camaraderie in that, that's a pretty cool thing. And I think, is that part of your own work now, is to help others see and find that? Is that in the in the job description for you right now?
It sure is. Absolutely. So, some people call it engagement. Some people call it culture. Some people call it onboarding new employees. But, it is absolutely, part of my role, and part of the joy that this role brings me is to help people find where that spot is for them. And as you said, not everybody needs to be, rah-rah cheerleader. This is the best thing that I'm doing with my 8 hours.
Yeah.
And we really hope that people don't sit here for 8 or 9 hours and think, oh my goodness, like, can this please be over? Like, I hate every minute of this,
Yeah.
And so in a big organization like mine, like a lot of your listeners are in, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity. And there are a ton of transferable skills that we all have, career pathing. It's so interesting when people talk about career pathing as this road that you walk down and there's step 1 and step 2 and step 3. It's much more, in my opinion, a treasure map, or some people call it a lattice. There's so many transferable skills that we have that you can, if you're an accountant, you don't want to do accounting anymore, you can take those transferable skills and do something else that's going to add meaning and value and engagement to your life. And so it's helping people navigate that, helping people find that sweet spot where it doesn't suck is really one of the important pieces of work that I do, and the team that I lead does.
How do you help people connect to that? I'm coming from a perspective. I worked in the advertising world for years, and there's a lot of fun and cool stuff in that. But one thing I don't know that ad agencies in general are great at is a little bit of what you talked about. I think generally speaking, you kind of plug in at the beginning of your career somewhere, and pretty much you're on a path. And it is pretty linear. There are people who will make an effort and decide, I want to jump over to this path, but then you're kind of on that path even. There's not really, like, I love the treasure map, that one really, like the idea that, like, you can wander and meander and there's something good over here and then there might be something good over here. And the idea that what we learn in a specific role does have transferable skills. I think that's true probably anywhere. And we're maybe missing out on getting the best out of people and helping them find more fulfillment and joy as a result of that. So how do you, sort of from a practical standpoint, what can you do to help foster that kind of environment at Berkeley?
Yeah. Well, I think here at Berkeley, anywhere in the world, the first thing that I would ask you to do is take a look at your job descriptions. Really ask yourself, are your job descriptions limiting the talent that are going to be coming into your organization? Your job description is your very first window that somebody sees when they're deciding if they wish to apply for a role within your organization, if they want to be part of your corporate fabric, if they want to help support you for success or not.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we started doing at Berkeley was we put just a little 2-sentence line on our job descriptions that call us out as a learning organization. Say, it is important that you continue to grow throughout your career, and we will support you in doing so by continuing your professional development and blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is that your organization wants to put in there, make sure that you're putting it in the job description and saying, hey, we care about you as an employee. We want you to continue growing. And that's the first thing you're going to see as part of this job description. And then you have to make it so. You can't just say that. You have to say, okay, for example, one of the things that we also did was say, how do we measure someone's success here? Our performance program was very goals-based. We used to joke that you could literally, as long as you got your goals done, you could leave a wake of dead bodies behind you and you would still get a,
attaboy.
Well done, whatever the thing was. And so we started talking about performance in a little bit of a different way. So as we talked about performance evaluation, we talked about it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. We changed our program from just talking about goals to talking about goal accomplishment, job mastery, the what you're doing, but also collaboration, continuous improvement, innovation, belonging and inclusion. These aspects of the work you do, we talk about it 3 times a year as part of your performance. Because it's not just what you do, it's how you do it and why you do it. One of the questions that we have our managers ask their employees 3 times a year as part of their performance evaluation is, what do you like best about your job? People are like, that's such a silly question. It's not a silly question. You know why it's not a silly question is because if I say to you, TJ, what do you like best about your job? And you tell me what you like best. As your manager, I can now say, wow, let me tell you how what you like links to what I need you to be doing that's going to move our organization forward.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell me something that has nothing to do with the organizational goals, that's an interesting conversation too. Wow,
Yeah.
see, that's really interesting. I had no idea you were interested in that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
What could we do that might link you more? What could we do that might help you find that in your career here? So
Mm-hmm.
that is a really, I think, powerful thing to do as you're thinking about implementing this.
Yeah.
Your job descriptions call out that somebody has 5% of their time for continuing professional development.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a policy that supports that? We wrote a policy here that says all employees have 80 hours or 10 days for continuing professional development every year. And then into the job descriptions, we encourage managers, when you update a job description for a new role, or, just yearly, every other year, looking at your JDs,
Mm-hmm.
in there, 5% time, because our JDs are very explicit.
Mm-hmm.
10% of time on X, 25% of time on Y, 30% of time on Z. Save 5% of your time for continuing professional development.
Yeah.
That equates to about 100 hours, not quite 80. But, if you have the policy and you have it in your job descriptions and you're calling it out in your job postings and you're talking to people about it as they're doing their work and as they're getting in their performance evaluations,
Mm-hmm.
if you're leveraging that, it really starts to quantify for people, oh, they mean it. And all of those things that I just said cost absolutely no money. They cost no money. Now, to support that, 80 hours, 10 days of professional development a year, that does cost money. Do you have a learning and development shop? Do you partner with a vendor? Do you go to conferences? But you can also do that for very little money. Maybe you have really strong employee resource groups. Your ERGs are really strong. And you say to someone, did you know that joining an ERG, a community of practice, an identity-based organization, whatever it is, did you know that counts as continuing professional development? Let me tell you why. Because when you're meeting these folks, you're expanding your network, you're expanding your mind, you're doing all these things that make you better, stronger, faster, more efficient, more effective, whatever it is. That cost almost no money. ERGs are bottom up, and people love to work on things they're passionate about. And if you give people a little bit of time as part of their role to manage those, your learning and development portfolio can start being built right there.
Yeah.
And those are some tips that I've implemented here at Berkeley and that we've done here at Berkeley with great success, as we're really thinking about really owning that proposition.
Yeah. I love the idea of rethinking the job description a little bit. I'm sure this is true at a lot of places, but it's just like a sort of a cut and paste exercise at a lot of places. And it's like, it wouldn't shock me at some point to look at a job description and it says part of your job is to clean the typewriters or something really dated, you know what I mean? Because it's just been cut and paste for years. And it's to be more thoughtful. I love the notion of some kind of intro that talks about your perspective on what it means to be somebody who works there and what that can provide to you, and that it's a place of learning, a place of growth, and that we support that. Just that, it's 2 sentences, 3 sentences tops, and you immediately have a different perspective when you sit down to work for the first day. And then being really clear, about what you're doing, I think can be really helpful. I even think the notion of there's the what you're doing, but who are you in this job? A little bit of getting into the who, you'll be this person, you'll be exercising these kind of brain muscles, you'll be, playing in this kind of space, you'll be having these kinds of conversations, so that people can picture themselves beyond the task, right? I think that could be helpful. And I think, that question you asked, like you said, it's a really simple question. What do you love most about your job? What I think is interesting potentially about it is, I don't know that a lot of people have that answer at the ready.
Right.
Because you're just in it. You're just working. And you might sort of intuitively be like, yeah, I pretty much like my job, or maybe I love my job, or I like some things, but you haven't really thought about it. And when you do think about it and you articulate it, and then you make that a regular part of the way you think and converse with the other folks in your organization, you're paying attention to what you love more. and therefore seeing, I love this, I don't love this. How can I create the next step in my career that allows me to do more of that love part and a little less of that don't love so much part, where you might just think, I guess that's just part of my job. So like simple questions, I don't know, as somebody who works as a coach, like sometimes the best questions are like the most seemingly plain and simple on the surface, like, but they actually get you thinking much more deeply than a theoretically, fancy, complex question,
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we did when we changed our performance program, we told people, here's the 6 questions that your manager is going to ask you 3 times a year. And one of the other questions that we have managers ask is, what can I do to better support your success? And people, I'm sorry, what?
I don't even understand.
What?
Yeah.
We literally created a little training video. So we have a section of our Grow page, which is our learning and development and people and organization development shop here at Berkeley is grow.berkeley.edu. So we have a little section called Grow on the Go. And so those are our kind of micro learning mini lessons that we create here in house. That's really kind of, Berkeley specific information for Berkeley. We're not creating things that you could pull off a TED Talk. We encourage people to get that information from those resources that are out there. But, we create some of our own. And we created a little video. Like when your manager asks, how can I better support your success? Here's some things to think about. Here's some scripts you can use. Here's some questions to ask yourself ahead of time to be prepared for that. Because it's a simple question, but it's not easy. That answer, like, what can I do to better support you? Pay me more money. Okay.
Sure.
And so, but if you can get into that and really start thinking about, here's what I like best about my job. Here's what you can do to help support me to be more successful. All of a sudden that why of work, Daniel Pink talks about, it's so important not to just what you do and how you do it, but why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so that why starts to become part of the conversation, in addition to the very, very important what you do and how you do.
Yeah, I really like that, how can I better support you kind of a question too, because one, sort of helping managers to see the power of that question and kind of maybe reframe their mindset, because I think, it's strange, but like when you become a manager or leader, that language isn't necessarily in your vernacular. Like the idea that you are there to support the people who theoretically work for you. And it shifts it more into like an I work for them kind of mentality, that servant leader kind of mentality that, I don't know, in most of my experience, it certainly wasn't front and center. You had to kind of maybe intuit your way there. And I think maybe I got a little better at it as I, learned and got some bumps and bruises along the way. But, and then I think as a person receiving that question, it's like, yeah, at first you're like, wait, you're going to help me? Like, okay. Cause I think there's a little bit of like, I got to figure this out in my own mentality. We all have. But it's like to really think, how could this person support me? To really think, okay, knowing that their position, knowing what they have access to, knowing the information that they may know that I don't know, knowing, what I need that I don't know, that they might know. Like there's so many like directions you can start to go that, again, by asking the question that you're now carrying that with you. And it's not even simply like when that question gets asked, it's, ooh, I have something I need right now. I'm going to go to my manager, where I might have sat there and like just sort of cranked on it for like days, not wanting to look bad. You've created permission for me to not know everything and ask for that support. So I think that's such a gift. And again, super simple, no money involved, right? It's just a simple process. I really like that.
Yeah, it is. We talk about, we're going to create a coaching culture. So we're going to do this workshop and teach people how to be coaches. Okay. That's step one. Well, it might even be step one anyway. But how are you opening those doors? How are you letting people know, particularly in an A+ culture? So I work in an A+ culture. Everybody's an overachiever. Everybody's brilliant. And I'm not being facetious. This is the smartest place I have ever worked. I mean, the people here, the staff, the faculty, the students, unbelievably brilliant.
Yeah.
And so when you're in that kind of an A+ perfectionist, toxic perfectionism, maybe in your culture, it can be scary to say, I don't know, or I need help.
Yeah.
So, and I could say to you, it's okay to ask me for help. Okay. Model it, literally model it, and people will start doing it. As a manager, model when you need help.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I could use a hand. I could use a thought partner. That's one of my favorite phrases. I could really use a thought partner, because that doesn't seem quite as scary as I don't know what I'm doing and I need some help. I can use a thought partner. So if you're not using any of these terms already and they feel a little scary or a little like, oh, I don't know, try that one. I could really use some thought partnership on this.
Yeah. That's a great one. It takes it sort of allows me to stand in a space of like, I know some stuff. I just want to like elevate my knowledge through some partnership and collaboration. But I also think just what you said, like whether it's a school like Berkeley or any of the other kind of elite institutions or a top company across any industry, I think the top ad agencies or the top tech companies or whatever. Yeah, like it's interesting in some ways that environment can breed a culture where asking for help is the worst thing you could do because you're so afraid that you'll get judged. And maybe some cultures are built in a way where you do get judged. You should be an expert. You went to Berkeley and then you got your MBA over at Stanford and then you went and got a PhD, at Harvard or whatever. Like, you don't know something, how dare you? So to set the tone early is another one of those big gifts to go, yes, you are brilliant and we need your brilliance, but not a single human on the planet knows everything. And we are more brilliant together when we share the fact that we don't know, because that gives us an opportunity to help each other and collaborate and learn. And that's where discoveries happen. Your research institution, right? The more we collaborate, the more we discover new things. So I love that perspective. And you talked about the idea of the coaching culture. That feels like a part of it. Yeah. Is there more to it? I mean, again, that's a buzzy term. I mean, I'm a coach, so I kind of hear it, but I even see, even in coach school, they talk about you can go into organizations and help them create a coaching culture. And that sounds wonderful, like you said, but what are some of the other steps that are needed to create that kind of a culture?
Yeah, I think, some of the steps we talked about earlier, that making sure it's part of your corporate fabric, by having policies and practices that support it, by making it part of how you measure someone's performance success, making it part of people's jobs. I think that's really, really important. And then also the training piece is very important. To your point, coaching is a really buzzy word right now.
Yeah.
And, building your shared vocabulary about what that means to your organization is really important. So in, coach school, they tell us that a coach asks a lot of questions and does not give a lot of advice. So a coach's role is to really work with someone, ask them really thoughtful questions and help them kind of ferret out the answers on their own, because they have that answer internally. It's in there, And I will say that there are people that will come into, an office, my office, someone else's office, and say, really need to have a coaching conversation. When in fact, they don't want a coaching conversation. They want an advising conversation.
Yeah.
They want a mentoring conversation, and so all of those words, I think they get mixed and mashed, and there's not a lot of clarity on exactly what it means. Like, I think I know what a coach means versus a mentor. The mentor in my work, mentors ask a ton of questions and also give a ton of advice. So that's the difference. Like, how much advice you give is really the difference in my very, very simple model about a coach and a mentor.
Yeah.
When you think about the other roles, an advisor, advising, when you're in your advising space, you're not asking a ton of questions. You're not, but you're giving a whole bunch of advice. If somebody comes in and they're brand new and something's on fire and, it's super time sensitive and you're trying to have a coaching conversation with them, they're like, please just tell me what to do.
Just tell me, please.
Please just tell me what to do. And so I think as you're building your coaching culture, I think it's really important to define what that means, to build some shared vocabulary around it so people can use vocabulary and everybody knows what everybody's talking about. And also to tell people, not every situation is a coaching kind of situation.
Yeah.
And it's okay that when things are on fire and it's time sensitive and you really don't know what to do and you don't know what questions to ask, it's okay to be like, I just need an advisor right now. Or if you have got it and you are moving forward and you know exactly what you want to do and you know exactly where you need to go, being able to go into your manager's office and say, I just need a supporter right now. I don't need you to ask me a ton of questions. I got it. Here's what I'm thinking. I just need, but I think as you're thinking about that coaching culture, all those pieces we talked about will help. Thinking about some bottom up ways, building those community of practice, building into these programs, getting people kind of involved in the grassroots, doing it top down. So making sure that your senior leaders are modeling it, making sure that when your CEO and the board are talking, if you truly want to have coaching embraced, they're using coaching practices, they're talking about them. So bottom up, top down, at the same time, thinking about and building that shared language so people know exactly what to be asking for and know what to expect. I think all of that is really, really important as you're thinking about a bigger coaching culture, a bigger organizational culture, a future ready culture, let's call it.
Yeah, God, it's such a great insight because it's actually one of the things I remember being, schooled on in coaching school was like really getting clear on the distinctions between coaching and mentoring and advising and teaching and training and And like, honestly, I feel like, every day I probably get a little sharper in my distinctions on those because there is some blurry lines at times between those. But the simple notion of a shared language, I think, is wonderful. Honestly, even beyond a coaching culture, I just think having shared language that people are clear on can solve like 90% of communication problems that show up in any organization, right? Because we say things and we don't mean the same things. And so getting that language right is really important. And when I think about that, I wonder, how do you do it? How do you get people to be super clear on those distinctions so that they can feel comfortable knowing when to go, I just need support, I need mentoring? What kind of process is involved there?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about communication. It's about writing things down. It's about sharing them broadly. It's about having kind of knowledge resources, be they websites, be they posters, be they whatever they are, they taglines. It's about being really clear and being consistent and being transparent. And, there's an old, this is an ad guy. There's that old saying, tell people 7 times, 7 different ways if you want them to hear you. If you want to, if my undergrad from 1,000 years ago is in marketing, so,
Nice.
7 times, 7 different ways. I say it all the time. Like, how are we talking about this? As we're thinking about this change, what is our change management process? What are we doing to communicate this change? What are we doing to make sure that we're being clear up, down, across, broadly? Is there a place where people can go to better, more deeply understand what it is we're trying to say? If something's in an email, okay, but is it in an email and is it on your website and is your leader talking about it in their town hall and does somebody create a little video that they put somewhere else that they're pushing out to people and people can go somewhere to pull that information out? I think, do you have core competencies? I know that's another buzzy word that's falling past its prime. So people don't say competencies anymore. Now they say capabilities. It means the same damn thing, but they, whatever it is, does your organization define this is what it means to be an employee here? This is what we want you to show. These are the behaviors we want you to show up with. This is the ticket to entry. This is the foundation. Do people know what that is? Do they know where to find it? Do they know where they can read about it and talk about it? Is there a community of practice where they can go talk about it with other people? Is there a social learning space for it? Is there, I talk about, I created a model years ago called the you, me, we learning model. And so when I talk about learning and development, I want to make sure that there's you learning. So as a learner, I look to you, the organization, to provide me with information. Me learning. Is there things that I know I can do as a learner to go out and get information that I need? And then is there a space for we learning? Can I come together in a safe space with a group of people to do learning as well? And if you're thinking about, creating a message or building a culture, you need to make sure that you have some you concepts, you have some me concepts, you have some we concepts, because learners need to be empowered to, we can't force people to be excited.
Yeah.
People are intrinsically, we can't motivate people. People are intrinsically motivated. So we need to figure out, how do we get them to own their development? How do we get them to move it forward? And how do we make sure that they're going to the places we want them to go to learn what we want them to learn?
Yeah.
How are they pushing information? How are they pulling information? And how are they coming together within their professional social networks to continue to build that into their work? I think all of those questions become really, really important as we're thinking about building these bigger future ready cultures.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much useful in that. I mean, I think the very foundational stuff is fascinating to me, because some organizations seem to be quite good at least expressing this is what it means to work here. These are the values we have. These are the traits we value. These are the behaviors we want to see. And then a very, I think, larger portion of employers fall somewhere down the scale. My experience in advertising was that was rarely a conversation of what does it mean to be an employee here? It was kind of like you mentioned onboarding earlier. And I'm I don't even know if I know what that is, because it's here's your desk, here's your computer. There's the standard suite of HR videos that you need to watch from a compliance standpoint, which I get it. Those are important. I'm not dismissing them, but that should be super the very beginning. And then there should be here's what it means to learn here. Here's how we support you in learning. Here are the values. And I don't think it shows up. I think it then leaves people kind of floating, and they don't know what it really does mean. And then they're not necessarily connected to the organization, and they almost kind of feel more like a free agent within the organization. And that might work for a little while, but you're probably not building, the long-term relationships that's going to allow someone to grow and support yourself much further. So when you are building that kind of foundation for people, I mean, I love the notion of the you, me, we. I think that's brilliant, because I think both it creates multiple opportunities for learning, but it also some people are going to be a little more responsive to one versus the other. And so you're adapting to that. And I think it's also a little bit of that 7 times 7 ways is coming through in that too, which I think a lot of people just really don't believe that. I think you believe, I said it once, that's enough.
Yeah.
And it's you said it once after thinking about it 27 times.
Exactly.
And that's where it gets lost, right? So we fully understand what we're saying when we spit it out, but that other person, that's brand new information potentially to them. So how can you, when you're thinking about that kind of 7 ways, 7 times idea, I mean, how do you get people to see the value in that?
Yeah. I think you're exactly right of the why we don't do it. We sit in at a leadership meeting and we talk about this new policy that we're going to push out, and we talk about it for months.
Yep.
And then we send an email and we're I don't understand why people don't get this.
Yep.
And it's exactly what you said, TJ. You've been talking about this for 6 weeks.
Yep.
They have heard about this one time. And so, I think data is unbelievably powerful, not just here at Berkeley. Data is obviously powerful here, but I think it's powerful everywhere. I love the idea of doing state of the workplace surveys. So doing little pulse surveys, figuring out what your questions are, and asking every 6 months or so, do you understand? Do you know where to find? Do you know what this means? And when you do those, though, when you're doing that information gathering, what you then need to do is do something with it. And so we do state of the workplace surveys here at UC Berkeley. We have a website where we publish the information. We talk about what we learn. We talk about what we're going to do differently. We talk about where we might have dropped the ball. So we not only collect the data, but we then share the data, and we talk about why it mattered. And so I think as you're thinking about how do you make people realize, how do you make them see that, there might be some fogginess or some muddiness, or there might not be this shared understanding that they think there is. I think gathering data and then presenting it to them can be really powerful. I also think, there's a challenge that we have as we move up in organizations, that even if we are racially diverse, tend to not be terribly educationally or economically diverse.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a real challenge as you're talking to some of the high level leadership within any organization that, okay, so, here at Berkeley, I live in the Bay Area. It's very expensive to live here. And so when you're talking to people at a certain level, they make a certain amount of money. They have a certain level of education.
Yep.
And they're brilliant people. And sometimes they might not understand that not everybody is in that same situation as they are.
Oh, yeah.
So when we talked about return to work, for example, we have a very liberal, flexible work policy here at Berkeley. And one of the things we talked about was, do you realize, we build personas. We build personas for our staff in order to help leadership understand. So build persona, Susie Jane. So Susie Jane is a frontline food service worker. She makes this amount of money. She lives an hour and a half away from campus because, we talk about, so she commutes in for an hour and a half every morning. She commutes home for an hour and a half every night. Gas costs this much money. The reason why she does that is because housing costs this much money. And she has a child, maybe she's a single parent, so all of a sudden when we do work from home opportunities, as a frontline food service worker, that probably won't work. So I probably picked the wrong job in my example, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But as we're thinking about some of these other careers where work from home is possible, maybe it's the first time ever that this person could retrieve their child off of the bus and cook their child a snack and then go back to work. Maybe it's the first time that in the morning on the way to work, they could stop at a parent's house who they are taking care of and make sure their parent has some breakfast and has some lunch, and then go, thinking about all of those questions that we don't necessarily think about when we're in like groups, be they racially, economically, educationally, getting people to think about those challenges and opportunities through somebody else's eyes, I think is really important. And a really good way to do that, in my opinion, is to create these personas. So this person that's in this job could look like him, her, them. This person in this job could look like him, her, them. Let's talk about what that means. It can really help humanize the work. And I think so if you have some data and you're collecting that data and sharing that data and talking about it, that gets people to continue giving you data. The worst thing you can do is have a survey and then not do anything with it, because the next time you ask for input, nobody's going to give it to you.
No
and then
way.
You sit back and think, why doesn't anybody answer my survey? Well, because the last 2 times you put it in a drawer or had a leadership meeting for 6 weeks about it and then didn't tell anybody else.
Didn't do anything. Yeah.
Get that data. Also think about how you can humanize the opportunities and the challenges within your workforce. And bring that humanized perspective to your senior leaders so they can kind of get out of their own bubble and start realizing that their live work experience is maybe not the same as the live work experience of some others on the team.
Yeah, that's really smart. I love the persona thing. I mean, it's like, one trend I'm noticing is just like a really systematized way of thinking and really being particular and intentional and creating things that go beyond simply talking about it, but ways that allow it to immerse into the culture more operationally. And I think that's it can be something that people resist because I think they might think, well, that's too formal, that's too rigid. And it's actually, you'd be surprised at how many people will appreciate that, that people appreciate a certain amount of process and systematizing of things, and then giving them flexibility to then go do their job. But at least now they know what their job is. They know what they're supposed to do. And the notion of the bubbles really sticks out to me because it's very easy in any job situation to be removed at least sort of emotionally from the thing. So when during remote, it kind of got in your face a little more, at least from my experience, because you had people telling you about their situations. Like, I got to drop off this call. I got to go, pick up my kid, or my kid's at home in school and I got to go spend an hour with them because they have something or whatever. And it just opened your eyes a little to, the socioeconomic differences, the family structure differences that people can have, the health situation differences that people can have, the geography differences. Yeah, some people commuting to work is no big deal because they live 10 minutes up the hill versus somebody who lives 2 hours away for economic or other reasons, family reasons. So I think encouraging people to think outside their bubbles and giving them tools to help them think and giving them data. And one thing that showed up for me that I wonder about, and I don't know if this happens at Berkeley, and I don't know if it happens really anywhere, but sort of get-togethers and mingling and sort of social/professional gatherings can often still be just bubbly. It's like the leadership team goes and does this thing, and the food service group goes and does this thing. Like, opportunities to get people to intermingle a little bit could be interesting to see the people and get to know the people. I mean, I think we don't always do a good job of that, even within our bubbles, of getting to know each other. But there's something interesting about getting to know everybody, or at least being a little more exposed to who's here, and how can we better care for them? Does that ever show up in your world, or is that way too complicated in a giant organization like UC Berkeley?
I think it's super insightful, and it absolutely shows up. And where it shows up around is trust. So one of the things we ask is, do you trust your direct manager? Do you trust the leader of your organization, unit, department? Yeah. Here it's generally a vice chancellor or in some of your listeners, it'll be the CEO or the chief finance officer, whatever it is. Yep. And so we pulled that data. Do you trust your direct manager? Do you trust the leader of your whatever it is? And there's a big gap. There is a big gap when you look at the percentage that trust their direct leader, and then the percentage that trust that person's boss or their boss's boss. And it's one of the reasons why we think that is, or I think that is because when you are removed, when you don't know someone as a human, it's really hard to trust them. Yeah. When all you hear is sound bites and they fly in for something and then fly back out. It's hard, particularly if they do something that breaks trust. If they say in February there's not going to be any layoffs, and then in May they're like, oh goodness, the world changed and we're going to lay some people off. That's all people see. They don't see that because they don't know that person as a human. They haven't interacted with them as a human. And so I think it's hard in a big organization. We have 9,000 staff. It's hard to give everybody visibility to the most senior leaders and to give those senior leaders the visibility to everybody. But thinking about ways to do it, thinking about how we can integrate those groups, thinking about, in our learning and development portfolios, do we bring people together or do we silo them? Do we only have an aspiring leader program and a seasoned leader program? Is that all we have? Right. Because those are super important. Those functional programs are extremely important. And community building is extremely important. And when I say community building, I do not mean make everybody come back to the office for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then sit in a cubicle and answer emails for 9 hours. Shocking. Sitting at a desk beside someone else sitting at a desk does not build community. Yes. So all of the leaders out there that are using community building as your excuse to bring people back into the office, everybody knows what you're doing. It's not, you're not fooling anybody. Yes. So if you really do mean community building, if you really, and it's important for all the reasons we talked about and so many more, if you really value community building, think about ways to bring people together as humans, to break down some of those silos and to get people to share and interact and be human together. We haven't figured out the exact formula yet. We used to do something pre-COVID. We did something called Summerfest, where we invited all staff for a couple hours on like a Wednesday to come to Central Campus, and we had food trucks, and we had our cabinet, which is like our board. So our C-suite would be like handing out ice cream, and would be handing out t-shirts, and would chat with people and take pictures. And, our mascot was running around, Oski was running around taking pictures, and, people were playing games, and, just walking around in the sunshine, having a little break, beautiful community building experience. And again, not saying that everybody needs to fund something like that, but if you can find a couple hours once a year to do something like that, I think it'll pay you back. I really do. I think it pays back.
I agree. And I think I love your point about the return to office stuff. I think that is a great soundbite, because I think on one level, like, yeah, of course, like everybody wants community, but they can also realize like, that's not it. Yeah. And now if you said, well, we want to return to office and we have some very intentional things we're doing every time we ask you to be here. Okay. Now you're starting to like make a little more sense to me, and I'm starting to trust you a little more. But I mean, even like you said, that little 2-hour event, like little micro versions of that could be wonderful too, like, whatever, but it's anything that gives people a chance to just be human together and relate to each other, in a slightly different context than the one that is like strictly the sort of professional, like I work over here and you work over here, can be a wonderful thing. So
yeah, it's a great question to ask your senior leaders is, do you know that person's name?
Yeah.
Just walk around the floor. Do you know that person's name? If they say no. Yeah. Okay, let's think about a way we might fix
How do we fix that? How do we, I mean.
Because what, if you're in a room of 100 people, they all know your name.
Right.
And is it fair to ask our senior leaders to know everybody's name? Maybe not, but
no.
There's things that we can do to help support that humanizing of. Yeah,
I agree. I think that just gets lost in the equation, whether people are working remotely, on-site, hybrid, whatever. I think we could all do better at that. So I love some of the stuff you're talking about as fodder for anybody who's wondering, how could I build something a little more of a community here? There's a few other questions I want to get to before we start wrapping up. One that is interesting to me about the university space, because there's I mentioned, I think the word even, it's a little bit, there's a purity about, it's committed to something, it's a research institution. When you think about the sort of, you're being a part of something big and meaningful like UC Berkeley, and then there's this idea of career growth and career pathing and standing up for yourself in that space. Is there any tension that people feel in that, where they almost feel like they maybe can't advocate for themselves because it's not the right environment for that? Like corporate America, it's like it's built in. Do you encounter any tension there in the university setting?
So maybe, I mean, I'm sure there's pockets of it everywhere.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we've done to combat that is to have a really strong talent acquisition group and to think about internal mobility and to talk about how internal mobility is okay. And so starting to normalize those conversations is really powerful. We have something called UC experience conversations. Lots of people call them stay interviews. People get freaked out when they hear stay interviews. So we called ours experience conversations.
Yes.
And we have that tool out there for managers to help them talk to their employees, talk to people that are, on the teams that they're leading about what is your experience and where do you want to go? And so I think there probably is tension, and there's probably more tension depending on who's leading different units.
Yeah.
I don't think there needs to be, though.
No.
I think we can think about ourselves as a place where people can grow. And obviously, it's challenging when we lose great employees. But when we lose great employees to their next great opportunity, we should be really proud of that.
Yeah.
Because then you know what? We have an advocate who's talking about, I worked for XYZ manager and now I'm doing this, and this is how they help me. Go work on their team because they will, those things self-perpetuate in ways that are really positive. So I think there is a little bit of fear in some individuals. I think we just need to model and normalize it for those folks. There
Mhm.
is fear in managers because it takes forever to hire people. We know that hiring timelines are very long. How
Mhm.
can we bust up some of that red tape? How can we
Yeah.
maybe make hiring a little bit easier? How can we support our talent acquisition team in
Mhm.
doing internal mobility?
Yeah.
All of those things are things we can think about to start maybe minimizing some of those challenges that pop up as we think about being a growth forward organization.
Yeah, I mean, I like just the idea of kind of just sort of normalize it. These are conversations we have. Yes, we are part of this big mission-driven organization, but we care about each person who works here, and we want them to thrive and bring their best wherever they can bring it. And so, whether it is those experience conversations or other ways you facilitate that culture, I think that's wonderful. And I think, that probably could apply to any organizations. I think about the world of nonprofits and others where there's just like occasionally like that resistance can show up of like, I'm getting to do work that I'm really passionate about. Should I also be, careerist? But it's like, you're not being careerist. You're just advocating for yourself. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so here's a very important question. I know you got your PhD and did some studying at Penn State. Now you're at Berkeley. If they were to play in football, who would you root for?
Oh, wow. So once a Nittany Lion, always a Nittany Lion. Go Bears. I would probably wear a, Cal Golden Bears t-shirt underneath my Penn State Nittany Lion jersey. Yeah.
I get it. That the Penn State allegiance is pretty powerful. I mean, that is like talk about a community. The community they have there is intense and strong, and everyone I know who's a part of it is adamant in their love for that organization. So I totally get that.
It's such, so people talk about athletics having no space in a
Mhm.
higher education institution. I disagree with that 100%.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get on my soapbox just for 3 seconds.
Yeah, please.
So, first off, it brings opportunity and diversity into your student body that you might
Mhm.
not get other ways, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And student athletes are fantastic. And I have sat with 100,000 of my closest friends in 19-degree weather outside watching my team lose.
Yeah.
And you know what? Smiled and had fun. Talk about
Yes.
community. I have sat in that, our stadium at Penn State, depending who you talk to, can hold up to 111,000 people. I have
Mhm.
sat there in
Yeah.
19-degree weather. I've sat there in rainstorms and looked around and thought, wow, you know what? I'm not crazy because there's 100,000 other people who are sitting in
Yeah.
this rainstorm with me,
No.
rooting for the same goal and, here for the same cause. And to your point, that's community. That's community.
There are certainly plenty of flaws in the university athletics system at large,
100%.
but as a community and culture building force, I mean, it's brilliant, I think. So I totally get what you're feeling. I didn't go to a school that was quite like that, but even on a small scale, I appreciated it. But like when you witness the Penn States and the Michigans and some of these other places with these 100,000 plus, it's amazing to me. I'm a little bit curious. This is probably a slightly toxic person to mention, but where is Aaron Rodgers in the UC Berkeley proudness scale these days? He was once a proud alumni. Do people have mixed feelings about him these days?
Oh, I've not heard the conversation. So,
Okay.
yeah.
He's just been a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, but his sort of political views are a little bit out there at times. And I wonder if that doesn't always sit well. He's sort of like the most famous athletic alum that I can think of from that school. I'm sure there's others that are up there, but I'm wondering if he's a little bit of a touchy subject these days. I don't know.
Yeah, well, Berkeley, home of free speech, so we will support anybody's ability to say whatever it is that they think, as long as they are not, causing violence for others.
Yes,
Free speech is really, really important to us here. So
I love that. I think
we might not agree, but I fully support your ability to talk
right to
about
say
it in ways that are not going to harm
yeah
physically other folks. So.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful perspective. I think it was just a curiosity that came up to me because I was like, who do I know from that world of UC Berkeley? Like that's like well known. And he was the only person I could think of, even though I'm sure if I thought of like people in business and science and medicine and all the other places, there's a billion people from UC Berkeley, I'm sure.
And many of them are just very outspoken as well, so
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's good though. I think it's okay. So you've talked a lot about ways to make work not only not suck, but make it, I think, genuinely great for people, fulfilling for people, to provide a fun treasure map kind of array of directions that people can go to, building good cultures. Beyond all that, if you could kind of wave a magic wand and kind of create this like fully desuckified work world, is there anything else that's like kind of on your wish list that would make it kind of even more perfect?
Yeah, I think first off, my very first waving of the magic wand would be to start at the very bottom of that needs pyramid. We need to make sure that people are making a wage that they can live and thrive on. We need to make sure that people are allowed to love who they want to love. And we need to make sure that people are allowed to show up as their authentic self at work, whatever that is, and be supported and be comfortable. I don't think in all of our organizations that very bottom has been reached yet. Now I live, West Coast, UC Berkeley. So, but I even still, like there are places where people do not make enough money to eat.
Yeah,
there are places where people can't talk about who they love and who their partner is because they're afraid of retaliation. There are places where people don't have the healthcare benefits that they need to show up as their authentic self. And you can take that exactly how I mean it. That stuff is the stuff that I think we really need to be thinking about when we're thinking about equity, diversity, belonging, inclusion. Those are so fundamentally important.
Yeah.
If we can get that right, the rest is just this wonderful kind of cherry on top of the sundae, the gravy on top of the mashed potatoes, whatever you want to talk about. But if I had a magic wand, I would start at that foundation and build that foundation across our country, across our globe to really, support people in those basic human needs. Because regardless of race, religion, creed, whatever it is, humans are humans.
Yeah.
If we can't treat each other and respect each other as humans, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And I think I love that you brought it up because I think all of the stuff that kind of comes above that pyramid is certainly very important as well. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. But, the fundamental foundational stuff doesn't always get the same voice.
Yeah.
It's not as, it's not always the hot topic, so to speak. And I think if we all just put a little more thought into that and, whether it's in with our own organizations or wherever we have any ability to impact that, some of that's political, some of that's organizational, some of that's, probably shows up in different ways where you can, advocate for those kinds of things, but we can. It's not like we don't have the ability to influence some of those things. And so, I appreciate that. And I think that there is a effect on the whole culture within any organization, within any community, within any state, country, whatever, when those fundamental needs are met. I think it actually creates more freedom for everybody when you've sort of guaranteed us that level of freedom and possibility for people at every stage. So I think that's a wonderful thought, and I appreciate you sharing that so much. Now on to something a little sillier. One of the things I like to do with every guest on the show is ask them to make a sound effect. It's really just a silly thing. I usually include it in the episode somewhere, maybe in the intro somewhere. For me, it's really just about like connecting to this sense of joy and play, which can be a really important part of making work more fun and not always being so in our heads and so serious. So I love just kind of trying to lighten things up a little bit with a fun sound effect. Do you have something you're able to share with us?
Oh, I love that, TJ. So I think the sound effect that I want to put out there to the world is a big kiss to everybody. So kisses on the cheek. I love people. I love being around people. I love, seeing folks that I haven't seen in a while, and the hugs, which don't make a sound. And I think maybe the big kiss on the cheek is something that I would love to kind of end this with, and just say, as we are trying to be more human, and we're trying to respect and appreciate and enjoy each other as humans, just being in that space of care and empathy and love, and that just seeing people in the is where I think I'd like my sound effect to be.
I think that's really wonderful. I think that word love, in the workspace is a weird and tricky one, but I actually think like we should embrace it and again, kind of find the right shared language around what that means at work, and showing up with genuine love and caring for the people we work with. And that then creates the curiosity to get to know each other more, and to know, where, people as humans, you talked about that idea of humanizing things. It's like, we're not simply sort of avatars for our role, but we are people. And I think that then creates a culture that then invites trust and invites all the good stuff that we want within organizations. And it allows us to, true love means we allow everybody to show up as who they are, to your previous point, and bring who they are, which is what we want. Who doesn't want the best of everybody within any organization, if you want to be better as an organization? So that's a wonderful sound effect. It will definitely find its way into the show. And I just really appreciate that and everything that you brought to this show. It's been a really interesting, eye-opener for me in some of those really tangible ways that you've found to improve possibility, improve culture, create a coaching culture. It's not just talk, right? It's things we can do. And I think that's something that people are really looking for. So I really appreciate it, Angela. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, TJ, for having me. And thank you for, building this podcast and this community for us to come together and share these ideas and build community and show up as humans and help and support each other. Thank you for all of the work that you've done to make this space a safe space for people to be able to truly come and learn and grow. I really appreciate the work that you've done, and thank you for inviting me to be part of it.
I really appreciate that. And I will ask one last question. If anybody wants to connect with you in any way, is there a place where people can follow you or find you or connect with you?
Absolutely. So the good thing about having a name like mine, there is only one of me in the world, so as far as I can tell. If you look up Angela Stopper on LinkedIn, you will come up with me. So nice. If you hear me on TJ's podcast, link me on LinkedIn, send me a note, let me know where you heard, copy TJ and I, so we can know that the work that he's doing is making the fabulous impact that I know it is. And I'd love to hear from you all, continue the conversation, and help to keep everybody growing and achieving, and maybe getting to that place where everybody maybe not loves their job, but is pretty excited to be waking up and doing what they're doing in the mornings.
Yeah, that would be
or evenings or whatever it is.
Whatever it is, that would be completely wonderful. It's definitely something I'm trying to help us, make happen even on a small scale. So thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. And you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider hacking into LinkedIn servers and replacing all mentions of crushing it with a photo of Buford in a DesuckifyWork onesie. A huge thanks to Angela for bringing oodles of wisdom and generosity to the show. You can follow Angela on LinkedIn. She's the only Angela Stopper in the system, as far as we can tell, so she should be pretty easy to find. You know what else are easy to find? My site and my Substack newsletter. Both are filled with desuckified bits of wit and wisdom. Want more than just a few bits? Let's set up a free half-hour Desuckified discovery session. Bye, everyone.